admit it, but I think this is a good point to start the last panel for today. This was one of the panels that our colleague Professor Evert van der Zweren was to chair, but since he couldn't come this afternoon, I will take care of it myself, and that also gives me the opportunity to say one or two lines about the project. Then in about 30 minutes, the five researchers that are here of the project will tell a little bit about their sub-projects, and then I hope we will have ample time for discussion. So I'm very happy to present the team that we've been assembling from October, November last year. The first one to join the team was Elise Aghazarian, who is our project assistant, doing all kinds of stuff with the database that we are building, the Facebook page, everything related to our external relationships, the advisory board. So that's Elise. And then after that, I think came Habtom and Matija together, two PhDs who will speak, the one on the Coptic church, Matija and Habtom on the Ethiopian and Eritrean Tewahedo church. And then in March, just before Corona sent us all home, Jan came to Nijmegen from Germany, Jan Gehm. And just at September 1st, Gaétan joined the team from Belgium as a postdoc. And we hope to welcome Chris Sheklian from the US in January. But he's already getting involved with the project right now. So now I will not say anything more, and I give the floor to Jan, who will start this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Heleen, for the introduction. Yes, my name is Jan Gehm. Just to my background, I'm a theologian, so I'm one of the PhDs. So my sub-project is the Syriac Orthodox Church in Europe. So now here, Syriac Orthodox communities in Europe. Just to tell you, my current title for the PhD thesis is Between Identity, Hybridity, Alterity, an approach towards an understanding of Syriac Orthodox communities between diaspora and homeland. So that this will be my project. And here you can see some books I have already collected, some productions in the German-speaking area. Yes. So just some general remarks. So about the Syriac Orthodox communities in Europe. So we have, since the 1970s, Syriac Orthodox Christians in Europe, some a little bit earlier, but migrated as labor migrants to Europe first, mostly to Germany. And in a later stage, they came as refugees also in other countries, like to Sweden, as we heard yesterday, and to the Netherlands, because of their insecurity and political situation. And yes, so several church parishes were built in these days, in this time. And the Syriac Orthodox Church established a diocese system in Europe. So we had different dioceses in Europe. So in Germany, something like the Middle European Syriac Orthodox Diocese, and then something in the north with Scandinavia and England. Yes, and these developments increased some literature production so we have a lot of publication of books, magazines, and teaching materials, and of course bulletins of the church in these different countries, in Sweden and Germany, where we have the most Syriac Orthodox population now, with 100,000 believers, and in the Netherlands we have approximately 25,000 people. Just to have some idea about Syriac Orthodox in Europe. So I will show you some example of my work. So one very nice example is a school book for the 5th and 6th grade of secondary schools in Germany. On the Way to Faith is the title of the book. And It was published this year, and it is for public schools, a very interesting thing. So it's typical, it's for the German situation that we have public religious education. Very nice, with 8 chapters about different topics and with a foreword of the Bishop of Germany and a prayer. So, as I mentioned, around 100,000 members in Germany. So we have Syriac Orthodox religious education and public schools. So in Germany we have the federal countries, so it's their responsibility. So in the West, in North Rhine-Westphalia, in the area where I'm living, Cologne, this area, we have it since 2000, in Baden-Württemberg some years before. So for example, to give you just an idea about how many pupils there are, so in 2017 and 18 there were about 850 pupils in Baden-Württemberg in the south of Germany, taught by 9 teachers in 51 schools. So, and this book is one example of the development in the diaspora in Europe. And I will show you now some pages from the book. So we have, in one page, we have language exercise with multilingual parts in German and Syriac. We have it in the whole book. On the right, you can see some education of rituals, like a guide how to pray, also multilingual. Then we have another example on the next slide, with the hierarchy of the church, with the different church offices in the Syriac Orthodox Church, with comparison to the German situation. So how is it with a Protestant or Catholic priest? So very interesting. And on the next slide, we can see some other things like the interconnection of the community and the host countries. So we have topics like ecumenism, with on the left with this tree of Christianity with Jesus and all the different branches and churches, so that one tree and all churches are belonging to this. And then we have like Martin Luther as an example for Protestantism, and we have the Quran and Judaism also in this book. So you can see it's a very diverse book and very interesting to see these topics in the book. So now just some research questions for my research. So how are Syriac Orthodox Christians seeing themselves in the current societies in Europe, with a focus on Germany, the Netherlands and Sweden? So of course I have to limit it maybe to Germany and the Netherlands. I have to see. And how is the question of belonging answered by the second and third generation in different European countries? So that's something what I'm focusing, how people are, what are they saying about their identity, and what are common grounds and differences. So, and also for me especially interesting, what role does the church and the theology play in this negotiation process of Syriacs when it comes to their identity? And the last research question I want to show is how they locate themselves in the discussion between the homeland, the diaspora, and the foreign. So these two spheres, homeland and diaspora. So for some, it's Europe is homeland. So that's a little bit difficult to say, but this is something I want to research and to know more about.
Good afternoon from my side as well. My name is Matija Milicic. I'm from Serbia, and I studied Arabic philology, and as Professor Heleen mentioned, I am focusing on the Coptic Orthodox Church and their textual practices in this project. So looking at what the Coptic authors are writing, translating, publishing, and also in more general, on a more general note, what kind of publications we can find in the Coptic bookshops. So I want to look at different genres, forms of publications, languages they use, who is also writing and who is also publishing, and looking at images as well. And for the purposes of my project, I'm closely looking at the revival and renewal movements or tendencies in the Coptic Church that have been happening since the late 19th century. And so to say, Copts' political, cultural, and religious awakening. And based on that, there is an assumption that these movements are still active and that they are continuing in the diaspora. So this leads me to my main research question. In what ways can the concept revival and renewal be used in describing and understanding changes and contemporary streams in the Coptic Orthodox Church in Europe that shape new interpretations of tradition and new expressions of belonging? And based on this question and on the general topic, some other sub-questions arise. For example, what can we even consider as revival and renewal in the Coptic migrant churches based on the past developments in the homeland, in Egypt? What is the role of language in these issues, and particularly in shaping these new expressions of belonging? And are there new interpretations of tradition based on connecting the present with the past and local with global? I will most probably focus on the Coptic communities in the Netherlands, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And I will use this course analysis to analyze selected publications, and I will also conduct various interviews with the members of these communities. And now I will give just a short overview of the textual practices of the Coptic Orthodox Church in Western Europe based on the current impressions. There are usually these small bookshops within the churches or their attached centers. They show a variety of genres, for example, prayer books, history books, hagiography, Bible interpretations, language books, books for children. A major impression is that a large portion of these books are written in Arabic, although there's quite a substantial part of it written or translated to local European languages, for example, English, German, French, Dutch, and others, and they're becoming more and more popular. One can also find Coptic texts, however, they have rather symbolic role and are mostly only part of the liturgy. Also, we can find various bilingual or multilingual publications. They're mostly imported from Egypt, and we can notice a large quantity of books published by Maktabat al-Mahabba bookshop in Cairo. And those written in local languages are mostly translated and published in the respective countries. Also, they show rich illustrations, for example, different kinds of photographs, images, or even authentic illustrations. And on the next slide, we can see some of the examples of the books that I have collected so far. So we can see different languages, Arabic, Dutch, and English, different illustrations indeed, and genres, and some more examples that show the same pattern. I'm not going to focus on that now because I don't have time, but you're welcome to ask any questions. So one of the most prominent elements of my project will be the issue of the Copt place within the Orthodox world. And here it will be interesting to look at how the migrant Copts look at themselves vis-a-vis other Orthodox communities, but also Christians in general. There is this everlasting question of who has the true Orthodox faith, and I will try to see and analyze if and how they write about it. And so what does it even mean to be Orthodox in these contemporary times, and who else is among the true Orthodox? It's important to mention, of course, the late Pope Shenouda III and his influence in the Orthodox and Christian world in general, since his writings and teachings exceed the attention of the Coptic Church. I also am interested to know who else among Coptic authors is writing about Orthodoxy. One of the most significant authors on theology and history in the Coptic Church was Father Tadros Yacoub Malati. He was a Coptic priest, theologian, and historian, and we can see one of his books on this slide, Tradition and Orthodoxy, published in 1979. In this book, he gives various definitions of the word tradition and he related to the true Orthodox dogma. According to him, tradition is not imitation of the past, not blindly copying past events, but rendition, transmission, and delivering something by hand. He criticizes the Western tendency, which originates from the Age of Enlightenment, to associate this term with backwardness or conservatism. He emphasizes also the fact that tradition should be understood and conducted as transmitting valuable teachings without any kind of deformation. So this word is very interesting, and we want to know what is the deformation. So it is crucial to understand this relation between the old, something original or authentic, and the new, something added or changed or adapted. So, and how does he and other authors look at this issue? So all these questions and ideas and assumptions lead me to a hypothesis that with given changes that are occurring in the Coptic Orthodox Church in Europe as a migrant church, there are new expressions of belonging among migrant Copts and new expressions of identity on a more general note. Also, there's an assumption that the migrant Coptic Church and the migrant Copts, especially younger generations or even converts, develop new interpretations of the Coptic tradition, given the fact that in various spheres and areas of the church's activities, adaptation and modernization hold a prominent place. And of course, these adaptations do not mean changing the tradition in its root per se, but looking at it in through a different lens, or rather adapting to different contemporary needs of the migrant communities. And perhaps it can be considered as a renewed form of tradition, which is part of a kind of continuity that evolves with its believers. And lastly, going back to my main question, I'm interested to know if we can detect a continuation of the last century's revival and renewal processes in the church that can now be described as global or transnational, and in this way contribute to the creation of a global Orthodox, Coptic Orthodox Church tradition that is changing the landscape of Europe. Thank you for your attention, and I will be very glad to answer your questions. And now I will give the floor or screen to my colleague, Habtom Yohannes.
Thank you, Matija. Welcome, everyone. My name is Habtom Yohannes. For my background and short bio, I refer to you to the website of Radboud University and our ERC project because of time. Originally, I am Tawahdo baptized in the St. Mary Church of Asmara, married to Evangelist Lutheran from the same city. My interest within our project is the staggering shift I have experienced and observed from revolution, politics to religion in the last 50 years among Eritrean and Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahdo or English Tawahido believers in the diaspora. The research period of our project conflates with the period that the Ethiopian Tawahdo Church ceased to be the state church of Ethiopia, with the downfall of the last Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974. What would Emperor Haile Selassie say if he would come back to witness the astounding growth of the Tawahdo Church in the West? I came to Europe at the end of 1979, beginning of the 1980s. There were almost no Tawahdos who went to church, let alone Tawahdo church in those days. We were all obsessed, Ethiopians and Eritreans, with the revolutions back home. The Eritreans supported the Marxist-Leninist Liberation Front. the current government, and the Ethiopians supported their own Marxist revolutionary movement against a communist regime. They all wanted to get rid of religion. We met every Sunday, not to read the Bible, but to read and discuss revolutionary books, pamphlets, some written and published in the so-called liberated areas of Eritrea and Ethiopia. This development continued until the middle of 1980s, beginning of 1990s. Gradually, people started to shift their attention from politics to religion, especially during the last 3 decades. The religiosity of Eritreans and Ethiopians increased in the diaspora, especially, increased exponentially. The left image is the Ark of the Covenant. If I may go back to the first slide, yeah. The left image you see is the Ark of the Covenant, Tabot in Ge'ez. That makes a church a legitimate church in the tradition of the Ethiopian and Eritrean Tewahedo Orthodox Church. In the middle, you see a replica of those of the Ark of the Covenant. Every church in Ethiopia and Eritrea has this tablet, one or many. Every Tewahedo church in Ethiopia, Eritrea, or in the diaspora should have a replica of the tablet. This is carried by a priest, what you see in the middle, in a procession during special festivities. And this happens also in Europe now. The right picture shows a church service in the city of Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Women occupy the right side of the church and men the left part. Just some more slides to show you the incredible increase in the religiosity, not only that, but also the confidence with which the new refugees are expressing it everywhere. This was non-existent and unthinkable in the 1970s and 1980s. What you see clockwise, the next slide, please. This slide, what you see from clockwise from top to left, the first one is Tewahedo Christians celebrating Christmas in the Fatima house in Weert. Second, celebrating at the front of Medhani Alam, Savior of the World, church in Amstelveen near Amsterdam. The third one, children choir of the Sunday school of St. Raphael Church in Amersfoort, where I live. The fourth one is a Tewahedo woman selling textbooks at the back of a church. The 5 church service in the only church owned by Tewahedo Eritreans in the Netherlands in Rotterdam, Kidane Meheret Church. Tewahedo Ethiopians own also 1 church in the Netherlands in Pernis, Rotterdam. The next slide, please. The last one, what you saw, can you please lose to the, back to the, yeah. This one, what you see is in Utrecht, Eritrean Tewahedo service in Utrecht. The images you see on the back are for sale, saints and angels. The next slide, please. And this is, clockwise, but let me start with the left image, top and bottom. This is the jungle St. Michael Church in Amharic, Yejenglu Kudus Mikael Betekristian. That is what is written. And this church I visited in 2015. It is in Calais, the jungle refugee camp in France, where refugees were gathering just in the jungle to go to the UK and other parts of Europe. And they built this church themselves. And this one is the inside of the church, very neat. It was amazing to see the church and how it was visited every Sunday. Clockwise, and the bottom, Ethiopian Tewahedo Church service in Dublin, Ireland, and then Ethiopian Tewahedo Church service in Stockholm, Sweden. The other one a Ethiopian Tewahedo Church service in Wiesbaden, Germany. And this one is in Liverpool. This is Wiesbaden, Germany, and this is Liverpool, UK. Aside from a sentimental feeling of homecoming, the project has aroused many thoughts and questions regarding Tewahedo Christians in Europe between 1970 and 2020. The next slide, please, Luz. Some of the questions I have, why and how have been Ethiopian and Eritrean rediscovering Tewahedo in Europe? Why is religiosity replacing political activity in the diaspora? What are the enabling and constraining factors of the West? Globalization, secularism, modernization, and integration for the Tewahedos. Away from the control of the state and synod, many have started their own independent churches. They have been writing and publishing books without the censorship of the state and the synod. Hitherto unknown or suppressed theological differences, identities, ethnical and sub-ethnical compositions are defining the groups in the diaspora in Europe. Various groups have been establishing their own churches, patriarchs in exile in defense of the state and the synod. If the diasporic Tewahedo religion, identity and culture, now is the diasporic Tewahedo religion, identity and culture an enabling or a constraining factor for integration in the host society, whatever that policy concept integration might be? The diasporic Tewahedo churches struggle to convey the theology and tradition of the church to the new generation. The next slide. Yeah, and these are the books I have been collecting by visiting various churches before the corona. What does the textual practices in Europe tell us about the community, theology, and mission of the emerging diasporic church in comparison with the main church back home? And what are the best conceptual frameworks, theories, and methodologies to address the issues inductively? The purpose of the project is not to define the groups from Western academic and policy concepts, but to let them define themselves within a critical framework. Thank you very much for your attention. Comments and questions are welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Habtom. So I'm the last arrived in this project, so I'm a postdoc now, and I will just give some information about my previous field work. So I've been working so far on the Copts in Egypt. My first field work for the PhD I did in Radboud University was about the Mokatam community of garbage collectors, the famous Zabalin in Arabic. And one prominent figure in the recent years in the Coptic Church is the Father Samaran, the priest of this community, the leader of this community. Very famous for different reasons, but one of those reasons is the cave churches he has built from the 1990s. You can see it on the picture, and is, let's say, charismatic style. So it's also probably another way for the Copts to identify themselves to broader trends in Christianity, because this trend is more linked with the evangelical charismatics than with the global orthodoxy. So that was my my PhD, and then I continued field work in Cairo for the postdoc in a neighborhood called Shobra. You can see here the famous singer Dalida, who is originally Italian and was born in Shubra before moving to France and making her career there. So Shubra is very well known for its cosmopolitan past before the 1950s, where you had the Greeks, Italians, etc. And still today, even if those communities have left the country, it's a place well known for the important Coptic population. So it's very often given as an example as the good coexistence between Copts and Muslims in Egypt and in Cairo. So now I'm joining this team with a new project. So I just started in September, so I just have 1 month of research. So I'm still trying to find my place in the team and to find the subject I will study in the framework of this very exciting project. So what I'm thinking of doing now is comparing the evolution of textual practices in Belgium, France, and Switzerland, which is French-speaking Europe, for different reasons, because I know French and it's a part of Europe that it's not covered by the other members of the team. The circumstances also push me a little bit to study the communities where I am now, which means in Brussels. I'm living in Brussels, and so with the COVID restrictions, as it is hard to move, maybe why not start with my own country. I'm also planning in the project to focus on the role and circulation of images, religious images, that we can find on the books we are gathering and introducing in the database. And also I'm planning to analyze those images, the images we can find on internet websites. So I think the next slide you will see an example, for example, an interesting example of a Coptic image that can be found in the famous Maktabat Mahaba. Matija just made an allusion to this bookstore and printing house. So you can see the mix of influences and the use of Photoshop basically to build those images. So I think it's a challenge to study those circulation and those images and the role they play in the life of the faithful. But and so another part of what I would like to focus on is also the role of internet, website, and social media in at the same time the use, how it is used by those communities to present themselves in front of the outside world, but also the way they use those tools to build communal, religious and communal ties. And I think they play an increasing part, as we have seen in the very interesting presentation today by our keynote speaker. So in the next slide, you'll see an example of a Facebook page of the Archevêché de l'Église syriaque orthodoxe de Belgique, France et Luxembourg. Facebook is an important place to exchange images, IDs, books, texts, etc. That we have to take into account. So in the last slide, I just wanted to maybe summarize some points that are kind of important for a group and for this project, which is, of course, studying textual practices. But we will not, I think, at least as a teamwork, we will try to really focus on interactions of each group with other churches and with with the wider societies in which those groups have settled in Europe, the new home countries of those Oriental Christians. And of course, the challenge will be to really identify how they relate or not to a global orthodoxy as an imagined community, to the practices, to the social practices and textual practices do they feel as that they belong to a global Orthodox community or not? So that will be really our main issue in the project. Thank you very much for your attention, and now we'll take all the questions you may have on the project.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Gaétan, and all the others for your presentation.